Kia ora koutou, everyone, and welcome to our mindfulness session tonight with Judy Hunter. I have just started the recording button so that we can make this session available to any of our educators in whānau who can't make it tonight. So this will be made available post the session for anyone who wants to watch it back. Just wanting to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who can be here and is attending. It's great to see some of our Eds, whānau and even wider Tiny Nation community here on the workshop with us tonight. I'm just going to kick things off with our Tiny Nation whakatauki before doing a wee intro to the session and handing over to Judy Hunter. Ka tūtahi tātou ki te kohi e te maturanga, hei oranga tinana, hei oranga wairua, kia tū tangata ai tātou. We gather to learn, to nourish, to flourish. Here we stand together. Tonight we've got Judy Hunter, a infant and child mental health specialist, beaming in to share all things mindfulness with us in relation to both kids and educators, or kākou, working with children, and share a little bit about what she knows in terms of how we can remain regulated and in a flexi, I think is the word a psychologist used at a PD session I was at the other evening, a flexi regulated state as we navigate external environments and all of the challenges that we are facing, especially at the moment in terms of this very surreal environment we find ourselves in, managing COVID and other winter ills and chills and all of the other external pressures that are heading our way. So one of our key priority learning focuses this term is hōra, or our health and wellbeing. And so it was really important to us to be able to bring some really relevant PLD into the picture so that we can support our educators in whānau with just general health and wellbeing, and this mindfulness session I'm sure will hit the mark. So I'll hand you over now to Judy Hunter, who will do a much better job of introducing herself and her background than I can probably do justice. Judy has founded Kōhuri Education, which is a new platform supported to support parents and caregivers and educators with infant and child mental health. So I'll hand over to Judy, and she will take us through the session on mindfulness. Kia ora, Judy.
Kia ora, Erin. Thank you. Welcome everyone. It's kind of weird doing this without being able to see you, but just give me a wave anyway behind your names. Great to be here tonight. Thanks, Erin, for inviting me. I've got a ton of info to get through. I always try and pack way too much into an hour, so I'm going to start talking quite quickly. And if there are any questions at any time, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and maybe Erin, you could keep an eye on that and let me know. Or I have my email address at the end. If anyone wants to email me, that's absolutely fine. And I can send through a PDF of the slides for anyone who's interested. I can send them to Erin. So let's get started. Just a little flyover of what we're going to be thinking about tonight. I'm just going to, for the first part, just do a little bit of setting the scene. So the what and the why of mindfulness. What is it? Why practice it? And then on to kind of the crunchy part, so the how-to for us as people who work with kids, and also a how-to on doing some mindfulness with kids, which is part of what I do in my day-to-day life. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. So this is me probably about 11 years ago now at my son's kindergarten. He's the little chap in red on my right with the next to the guy in the yellow. He's now 13 and looking me in the eye, so this was quite a long time ago. So my background is that I'm a child mental health specialist. I trained as a child psychotherapist in the 90s in Wellington. I did work as a child psychotherapist for a time, but in the last decade I've really chosen to pull back from clinical work and do much more consultation, supervision, training with people who are working for children. So at the moment I'm based in the Hawke's Bay, and I do work at both the Hawke's Bay teen parent schools here, both with the parents and the early childhood educators, so I do a lot of work on that side, consulting with them around the work they're doing with the kids, because there's a lot of trauma. I also do mindfulness for kids work in kindergartens here in the Hawke's Bay, and that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm on the executive there for Mental Health, Aotearoa New Zealand Association, and I'm a mum. In my head, I'm actually a full-time mum, but that's not true anymore. And as Erin said, I have Kōhuri Education Co. have launched an online platform for my work this year with online courses and consults. So the reason I get to talk about this for you tonight is that at the start of 2012, I did a meditation course. I'd had a personal tragedy and I decided I wanted to do something on my bucket list. And so I did a meditation course, which pretty much changed my life, both personally and professionally. Personally, because it gave me some really awesome tools to use in the time that I was going through, and professionally because as I was doing my sits in the morning, Ollie would come alongside me. He was 3 years old, and he'd sit next to me and do his deep breathing like I was doing, and then last about 3 seconds and get up and run off and say, I did it too, mummy. It really made me think about what mindfulness might mean for kids. So mindfulness being the byproduct of the meditation practice that I was learning about. And I was also reading a book called The Whole Brain Child by Dan Siegel, and I really thought how cool it would be to teach kids about their brains. So I started Googling, as you do in the age of Google, and realized that there was this huge groundswell of mindfulness for kids in the world. And I did a pilot at my son's kindy, so that's where the photo was taken. And since then have worked in about 25 kindergartens, a couple of schools. I've done it with the teenage mums that I work with, teaching this my version of mindfulness, and I'm going to get into that a lot more towards the end. So normally at this point, I'd ask people if they have heard of mindfulness and have a mindfulness practice, but with your cameras on, that's a little bit hard. I suppose we could do it in the chat, but in terms of time, I won't worry about that too much tonight. So I'm going to dive on in to the content. And starting with what is mindfulness. So I just want to really be super clear about what it is, but actually what I normally start with is what it's not, because there can be a little bit of a misperception about it sometimes. So it's not meditation, though many people do come through it through that path. It's not got anything to do with religion, politics, and it's not a theory. It can only be experienced through practice. And crucially, it's not about zoning out or not thinking at all. So it's actually the opposite. It's about being in charge of your thoughts and directing your attention to where you want it to be at any given moment. So mindfulness and meditation are different in that with mindfulness, we can bring ourselves to be mindfully present in any area of our life. Meditation is often a more formal practice. It doesn't have to be seated, but it often is. So we don't need a quiet, still space to be mindful. But we can get a still quiet place in our minds by practicing mindfulness, and that'll evolve as we go through tonight. So this is my favorite definition of mindfulness. It's slightly different to what I tell kids, but it's from a man called John Kabat-Zinn, who's really credited with bringing mindfulness to the West. He says it means paying attention in a particular way, so not just any old paying attention. There are 3 parts to it. So there's on purpose, which means that my words are not just falling into your ears right now, you're actually intending to listen to me. It's in the present moment, so it's very much a moment by moment thing. It's not thinking about what I said before, and it's not anticipating what I'm about to say. It's just this moment now. And really importantly, it's non-judgmentally. So you're not attaching judgment to what you're noticing, which can be quite hard because as humans, we make judgments all the time. We judge whether we're too hot or cold, take a layer off. We judge how fast a bus is going, if we're going to cross the street and we see it coming. It's really important for us to judge as human beings, but when we're being mindful, we try and suspend that judgment, and we just try and have this really, this ability to just notice. So, sorry, I'm having difficulty moving my slides over. So mindfulness is the remarkably simple process of noticing things. Except for anyone who's tried meditation or mindfulness, it can be anything but simple. And certainly our mind really loves to jump around. So it's called the monkey mind, loves to jump from one thing to another. And all of us have this as kind of a fallback position. So actually being mindful can feel incredibly hard, but you're not failing if your mind jumps. It's just the practice of bringing your mind back over and over again to where you want it to be. So the mantra for mindfulness, a little bit like, you have a mantra for real estate, it's notice, notice, it's location, location, location. For mindfulness, it's notice, notice, notice. And it's been a really important part for me developing this noticing awareness, because it's meant that I don't have to react to things that I notice. And for me, that's been incredibly freeing. So I found a quote that said, "It is not necessary to react to everything that you notice," and mindfulness definitely holds that to be true. So teaching how to discipline the mind and control emotions, so otherwise known as mindfulness, is had this global groundswell. It's been picked up by lots and lots of things. The UK Parliament decided they wanted to be the first mindful parliament, and they put a whole lot of people through a course. Google uses it, eBay, Intel, Harvard Business School teaches it. Athletes, rugby players, Olympic champions, authors, ballerinas, lots and lots of educational institutions now have mindfulness as part of their curriculum. So it's probably not too grandiose to say that we're living in a time of a mindful revolution, with some problems attached to that, because it can get a bit sort of misused or misrepresented. But it's big when even colouring in has been given the mindfulness treatment. I don't know if anyone's tried that. So just really quickly about what it does and doesn't offer. So I think in the 1980s, there was a couple of studies done on mindfulness, and now there's probably a couple of studies coming out every day. They're not all super positive. Most of them do have really good effects, but you will find some studies where they didn't show any significant difference in people practicing mindfulness. So it really depends on what your practice is, how you're doing it, what you're doing, where there will be effects or not. This is taken from a 2012, so it's actually quite old, but the empirically supported benefits of mindfulness from the American Psychological Association. I'm not going to read them out, but just these have been borne out in studies in the last 10 years that practicing mindfulness in a meaningful way, in an ongoing way, so not just ticking a box saying I've done it once, it's want all these benefits, but on an ongoing daily practice can lead to some pretty incredible differences in your life, including lengthening your telomeres. So telomeres are the caps at the end of our chromosomes. They were thought to be fixed and that they couldn't change. And they pretty much predict how long you're going to live. One study found with some long-term meditators that they actually increased the length of their telomeres. So there's some thinking that if you practice kind of a deep mindfulness meditation practice, you may actually be able to increase how long you live, which is pretty cool. So the best way to experience mindfulness is through practice, and often this is done through the breath. In the interest of time tonight, I'm not going to do this, but this is often the time in a talk where I'll ask people just to put everything down and to spend a minute just breathing and just noticing the breath going in and out, slowing it down a little bit. And the reason that we start with the breath is because, as Jane Martino says, and she's the founder of a program called Smiling Mind, if you can breathe, you can be mindful. We all have the breath available to us. I'm going to come back to the breath later in terms of some exercises that we might be able to try, but one of the great things about the breath is it's always there. You can always use it. There's always an opportunity to slow it down. And there's always an opportunity, because your mind will want to wander when you're noticing your breathing, to bring your mind back to the breath. And every time you bring your mind back, you are actually strengthening the muscle of your attention and your awareness. And that is part of being mindful. So it's not that you can't think at these times, but that you are choosing where to think. And if you're choosing to think on your breath, then you just keep asking your mind to stay there. You don't judge your breath. You don't think, oh, it's too loud, or it's too soft, or it's too fast, or it's slow. You just allow, you just notice. You allow it to be how it is. So like I said, normally I'd try this now, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going, and we may have time to practice a few techniques towards the end. So just one last thing in this intro bit is that mindfulness is like pizza, or at least it has similarities. And this is an explanation that I've borrowed from a woman called Amy Saltzman. She has a program called Still Quiet Mind, and it answers the question that some people wonder about whether mindfulness is Buddhist. I think that's becoming less questioned as people come to know more about mindfulness, but it's a good way to explain the difference between the two. So is mindfulness Buddhist? No. Mindfulness is an innate human quality. It's something that we can harness and use. And you don't need to be Buddhist to practice it any more than you have to be Italian to enjoy pizza. So it honors that mindfulness does have its roots in Buddhism, just as pizza has its roots in Italy. But you don't have to adopt all the customs of Italy to enjoy pizza, and nor do you have to adopt all the customs of Buddhism to be nourished by mindfulness. So apparently Italians didn't even invent pizza. They kind of played around with some iteration of toppings on bread. And it's the same with mindfulness, that Buddhism didn't, the Buddha didn't create mindfulness. He was borrowing from different traditions and religions. So it's just a way to kind of tease the two out. Okay, so now on to the why practice mindfulness. So there's a couple of reasons why this is really important for me to be doing this work with kids. And I'm just going to talk through them both briefly. So the first one is that it is a proven antidote to living in a stressful world. And the world is stressful at the moment, as Erin says. You know, even before COVID, the world was increasingly stressful. You know, despite the fact we haven't had a world war for a long time, life feels anything but easy and peaceful for a lot of us. There's been an increase in workloads, workplace stress, the global financial crisis, climate change, global terrorist threats, increasing use of devices, being really busy. So it means a lot of people, and then COVID means a lot of people are now living close to or actually in a state of chronic ongoing stress. You know, since the 80s, busyness has become a bit of a badge of honor. It's something we expect of people. Sometimes we expect it of ourselves. And there is some evidence that shows that we do think busy people are better, which is sad. And in some ways, rest has become commercialized. So there's a wellness movement. There's this idea that you should be doing things, you know, to slow down, like yoga. But actually, that should just be a part of our normal practice. And the result of all of this ongoing stress and COVID, other things, is really taking its toll. We feel guilty when we rest, so we don't do it enough. And even kids these days aren't exempt. There's a lot of scheduling that goes on for kids. I didn't talk about devices, but devices certainly add to the pressure that we can feel in our day-to-day lives. So the peaceful world that we live in is anything but stress-free, or did live in. Oh, just move it on, and it's being a bit tricky. There we go. So just really quickly looking at the human stress response. So the first thing to know is that not all stress is bad for you. There are different types of stress, and actually small managed doses of positive stress response is actually really good for us and for kids, and it builds resilience. But unmitigated stress and anxiety are really bad for our health, and that's called the toxic stress response. So there's been a lot of research on stress in recent years, and it shows that healthy development can be really derailed by excessive or prolonged activation of the stress response in the body, especially in the brain. So that's particularly bad in early childhood, but at any time in their life, it's not good, and it affects learning, behavior, and health, and that's sort of in every area of our lives. So the key to that is that our bodies and our brains need frequent relief from stress in order to keep it manageable. And we need to be aware of the way that we respond to stresses in our lives. So it's really important that all of us, including kids, have time to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is also known as rest and digest, to give our bodies a chance to come back to calm. So it's okay to be stressed for a little bit as long as we come back down. So anything that reminds our bodies what calm feels like is a good thing to do. And when you're able to experience your thoughts, your feelings, and how your body's doing without being overwhelmed, the more likely you are to be able to cope and build resilience in the face of stress. So I'm going to quote a woman called Linda Lettieri, who was involved in Ground Zero after the 9/11 attacks, and she had a program called a resilience program. And she said young people, but actually I think everyone, needs to have this inner strength, this inner reservoir they can depend on and go to when difficulties arrive, so they're able to manage their stress. And so this is where mindfulness comes in. So mindfulness can help beat a bit of stress, can help you bring you back to calm, and then it also builds the practice of being calm and happy. Some really good research around mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy, which is a program for people who are feeling depressed and anxious, that actually can be as effective as drug treatment for some people. And part of that's because you're really focusing on where you're putting your attention, and you're feeling more in control and more in control of your thinking. Okay. So the lovely quote again from John Kabat-Zinn: "You can't stop the wave, but you can learn to surf." And so it's a mindset shift. It's a stress is going to be there, but what can I do to manage it? Okay, so the second reason I think this work is really important is because it builds the mental muscles of awareness, attention, self-regulation, compassion, and resilience. So this is true, that our mind is not a great master. It's much better when we're in charge of it. We all have capacity for awareness, attention, self-regulation, compassion, and resilience, but we're not born fully functioning with all of those attributes. We really need to have those wired up, partly in relationship and partly through practice. But there is something that can get in the way of that. So just a really quick explanation about how our brain works. And this is an explanation I use with 3 and 4-year-old kids. So it's the hand model of the brain. If you have your hand in the air, thumb goes in the middle, fingers over the top. This is borrowed from Dan Siegel. And if you want to YouTube it, you just look up hand model of the brain, Dan Siegel. So he talks about how the top part of our hand is like the where our forehead is. This is the smart part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's all where our really sophisticated thinking comes from. When we're calm, that's the bit that's in charge. But when we get a fright, or when we feel like we're in danger, our brain will flip its lid, and the prefrontal cortex will go offline. And deep in the middle of our brain is the limbic system, and there's the amygdala in there, which is the alarm part of our brain. That's designed to keep us safe. So normally there's a conversation going on between the two parts of our brain. Obviously, this is very simplified. Apologies to all the neuroscientists in the world. There's a conversation going on between the two parts of our brain. Information comes in to the amygdala through our senses. It passes it through to the prefrontal cortex, and it helps us to kind of regulate temperature and know what to pay attention to. But there's no point in that conversation going on if we're in acute danger. So if we're about to be hit by a car, we have to be able to react. We can't have this slow thinking. We have to have fast thinking. So that's why the brain flips its lid. The prefrontal cortex goes offline. The amygdala is in charge then, and it sends this neurochemical fuel around our body so that we can get ready to fight or flight. So it's an ancient hijack, amygdala hijack, in order to keep us safe, which is great if we're in actual danger. But our brain doesn't tell the difference between actual danger and a perceived threat. So our brain will still flip its lid, even if there's not a lion. So for anyone who's got teenagers, they don't ascribe, they ascribe negative emotion to people's faces more often than not. So their brains are flipping their lids all the time, and they are, they're not actually in danger, but they perceive other people as maybe looking at them in a slightly angry way, so their brains might flip their lid. So even when we perceive that there might be a problem, our brains will still go offline. So it's really important to know what to do to calm things down. And there is only one thing really that can get us the connection back between the two parts of our brain, help us be more rational, more logical, and that is oxygen. So that's the deep belly breathing part that we're going to come to with mindfulness. So really quickly on, these are my ABCs of mindfulness. When we train our mind where we want it to be, we increase our awareness and our ability to pay attention. We become more able to acknowledge and accept things as they are. We can't do this without being aware. And so it's one of the fundamentals of mindfulness, like I said, notice, notice, notice. Then by breathing, just being, which not a lot of us do very often, and finding some balance, we can build our ability to self-regulate and build resilience. And then finally, with all of this comes the ability to offer compassion, not just to others, but ourselves, as well as find clarity and calm some of the time. So mindfulness isn't some magic panacea that's going to, bring endless zen, but it can put you on a path towards more happiness and calm in your life and treating yourself better. And Amy Saltzman, again, who I talked about earlier, she talks about the mindfulness being the truest form of preventative medication that she knows, and that if it came in a bottle, it would far outsell any other drug that was out there. So it can be a portable equilibrium tool if you want it to be. Okay, so now we're on to the crunchy part. So the how-to. So this is quite heavily weighted for the mindfulness for educators, because what you'll find is that the more you do it and practice yourself, the more you're able to do it and practice with kids. I am going to talk at the end a little bit about some of the things that I use with kids, but really just kind of deep diving into why it's so important for educators first. So these are some things adapted from a great organization called 0 to 3, who have some really interesting stuff on mindfulness on their website if you're interested. They have some things you can download to use. I've adapted it because this was what is mindful parenting, and I've called it what is mindful educaring, noting that, it's not just educators and it's not caregivers, it's kind of a meld. I won't read them out, but these are some things that are really valuable for kids. And there's this whole kind of other talk I could do around this in terms of, being attuned to children and why that's really important. But in order to do that, we really have to be attuned to ourselves first. And this is what is on the screen now, this is what mindful educaring offers. So the how-tos of mindfulness for educators is that it starts with ABCs, using mindful self-regulation, and the practice, practice, practice. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each of these. So starting with the ABCs, so these are the ABCs of MSR, which stands for mindful self-regulation, and I'm going to tease that out in just a minute. But this is about the awareness that I talked about. So we can't make change unless we're aware. And mindfulness isn't necessarily about making change, but if you did want to change, you'd have to start with being aware of something. So you become aware of your own reactions, your thoughts, your feelings, your body tensions, and you accept them. So it's not about changing at this stage. When we're aware of something, we try and bring an acceptance to it. And when you're able to be aware and accept, then you may be able to move to change if that's what you want to do. So in terms of using this in your role as an educator, you may be becoming aware of the times that you feel triggered with children, or the times where you feel tired, or the times you feel energized. So bringing in awareness to those times, which leads to some balance. So we're going to visit some strategies in this section about coming back to emotional balance. And when we're balanced, we can connect. And there's this whole science around connection. Children aren't looking for attention, they're looking for connection. We're hardwired to connect. Attunement in relationships is the most valuable thing you can offer kids, and you can't attune unless you're connected. So this is all about building up awareness to have balance, to be able to connect, because that's the most valuable thing you can offer as an educator. So the idea around mindful self-regulation. So this is important because Brené Brown has a lovely quote, which is, "Anxiety is contagious, but so is calm." Mindful self-regulation is a term I've borrowed from a model that I train in called the FAN model, which stands for Facilitating Attuned Interactions. It's from the Erickson Institute in Chicago. I've been training it for quite a while, and it's about attuning in relationship and how to do that really usefully. It's kind of what the whole model is about, and it's used in health, social services, education, justice. Mindful self-regulation is a really important part of the model, because we can't be most effective in relationship unless we are calm ourselves. So it's a really important part of being able to regulate ourselves in order to attune to others. Mindful self-regulation, first of all, we are aware that we're becoming dysregulated, and then we can bring ourselves back to calm. So you can think of this like a glitter bottle analogy. So you think of the glitter bottle when it's got glitter inside and it gets shaken up and everything's stirring around. That's when you're dysregulated. And being able to settle the glitter, being able to allow it to come back to a calm space is really important. So like the quote says, to bring calm, you need to possess it. So part of that's the awareness, and part of it's the practicing, coming back to balance. So the practice. I don't think I said at the start is that when I first learned about meditation mindfulness, I really wanted to be able to tick a box and just live mindfully for the rest of my life. And I really kind of fought against the concept that it's a daily practice, but it really is. And it's great that it's daily practice because there's always so much to practice on in terms of being mindful. It's not something that you can just do once and then merely go on your way. It is something that you have to bring your mind to over and over again. And being with little people, being with kids, gives you lots of practice around bringing yourself back to calm and practicing being in the moment. There are 4 areas we're just going to go through now around some practical things to take away. These are in the 4 areas: breathing, grounding, self-talk, and imagery. I'm going to encourage you to try out different things. If you've got a mindfulness practice already, extend it. If you're just starting, start small, grow it as you can. These aren't quick fixes that I'm about to talk about. These are practices, things that you would want to do over and over again, and see what happens when you do that. When you're practicing, you're literally laying down a new pathway in your brain. So it can feel clunky at first, it can feel difficult, but with ongoing practice, it can certainly become more easier to access. Okay, so each of these 4 areas in a little bit of depth, or as much as I can in the time. So the first one is breathing. And like I said, we always have the breath. We learn it first because it's always there for us. It's something that we can always access. And breathing is what regulates us. It's what gets the prefrontal cortex back in control of the amygdala. So there are some tools on the page. So breathing doesn't have to be complicated, but there are tons of breathing tools. And I've got some apps at the end that I suggest, which have lots of guided mindfulness practices on them that you can use as well. But a really simple way is certainly just taking a big, slow breath in through your nose and then out through your mouth. And when I'm doing this with kids, I'm talking about smelling the flower. So you've got your finger in front of your nose, you smell the flower, and then you blow out the candle. So in through the nose, out through the mouth is what you're aiming for. There's lots of reasons why we do it that way that I won't go into now, but it's an easy way to remember it with smelling the flower, blowing out the candle. So just bringing yourself to the present moment, just noticing your breaths. It's a really easy way just to come back to now. Another one that's also easy to do but can take a little bit of practice is the box breath practice. So this is number 2. So you imagine that you're drawing a box in the air or even in your mind, starting the top left of the box, and you inhale for 4, you hold for 4, you exhale for 4, and you hold for 4. This is used by first responders in the States. It's a great one because it's got some very cognitive elements to it. So it's really getting you to access your prefrontal cortex, but it's also got breathing. And when we hold our breath, we build up CO2 in our blood, which can have a more calming effect. So the hold is actually really an important part of the box breath practice. And then the third practice is, didn't look like that when I had it on my screen. I can see it's gone down the bottom, but it's about an audible sigh. So you can do it bringing your shoulders up and then releasing all of the air in your lungs and all of the pressure on your shoulders, bringing them right down by letting out a huge sigh. And there's some science around this that just helps to relax both your body and your brain. So just the sigh on itself is a way to release tension and to reset yourself. And I think there was one more I was going to talk about, which I didn't put on there. No, that's okay. There are loads more. So these are just 3 really easy ones. You can choose whatever works for you, but here are some, kind of starters, I guess. Grounding, there's some groundings, anything that helps you to feel like you are connected to yourself, to the earth, to the environment. Sometimes when we get into fight flight, we get very out of our heads. So this is about a way to bring ourselves back down. Anything that helps you to feel yourself in this moment. So you can take a sip of water, you might rub hand lotion into your hands, you might wash your hands. Anything that you can do to bring you to right here, right now, and feeling yourself in this moment is something that would be called grounding. So the first practice is a really lovely one to do with kids as well. So it's anything that you can hear, see, feel, smell, and or taste. And you can do any of those 5. You can do all of those 5. You can do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things you can hear, 4 see, 3 you can feel, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Or you can try a mindful cuppa. So this is how I start my day. My first cup of tea of the day is in silence, just noticing the whole cup as I drink it, because I don't know if anyone else does this, but sometimes I can eat and drink things without noticing. So the mindful cuppa is a really nice way just to slow things down. The second one is a mini mindfulness moment, just simply putting both feet flat on the floor, feeling the solid earth beneath you, breathing deeply. You can combine it with a full body stretch. You can do it when you're walking, any way you like, but it's a way just to remind yourself that you are held up by the earth. And the third one, which I don't have time to go into, but Google it, it's a really great one. It's the hand on the heart exercise. It's an association exercise. So you build up this association of feeling safe and loved. And then whenever you put your hand on your heart, once you've built up that association, you can bring yourself back to calm by the touch of your hand, or you can put your hand wherever it is that you need to. But you build up this association that helps you feel safe. Self-talk exercises. We all have self-talk. We all say things to ourselves in our head. We don't always say nice things in our head. So self-talk is a really good one. If you do have a critical inner voice, it's about kind of reworking that. Again, you're not necessarily trying to make change, but just bringing that awareness to the voice and some acceptance, and maybe trying out some new self-talk to be talking nicer to yourself. The story that I tell around this is that, so thinking about the first one with the positive mantras, is that my husband doesn't seem to be able to put the toothpaste into the toothpaste holder at any stage. And when I started doing this about 10 years ago, I was getting really cross and dumping it in every morning, and why can't he put it away? And I started to change that narrative. I decided to change. I was sick of saying that. I wanted to say something different. So I would pick up the toothpaste and I'd say, I choose love, and I choose happy, and I choose to be of service of my family. And I would very gently pop it where it went to go. And when I first started doing it, I felt a bit kooky, but 10 years later, I can safely say that it's a very ingrained part of my morning. I just pick it up and I say those things and I pop it away, and it's become just a much nicer way to have that moment in my life, and something that you can apply to anything that maybe you're finding a little bit angsty. And also practicing gratitude can be a really important part of that. The name it to tame it comes again from Dan Siegel, and if you name what you are feeling, it loses a lot of power over you. Or you could simply just say notice, 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 which is where I started, and I still do sometimes. When I just need a little moment just to balance myself, it's just notice, notice, notice. And then the third practice is an acronym called STOP, which stands for stop, take a few breaths, observe, proceed. It's a much longer practice, but again, in terms of time, just mentioning it here if you want to Google that one. And then imagery. So this isn't for everyone. It's certainly something to try, and I really enjoy it now. I didn't to start with, so a lot of practice around this one. If you Google the Calm app or website, they have a bubble breathing exercise. I think lots of places do it now, and you just watch a bubble getting bigger and smaller as you breathe. So it's a really good one if you're struggling with just simple breathing. It's a really good one to center you for that. Another way of using imagery is to imagine that you're not climbing the steepest mountain in the world when you're feeling stressed, but there are little foothills that you go up and down. And when you're coming down the other side of those foothills, those are moments to relax your body and to reset before you start another uphill. And the third practice is what's called a body scan. So this is a way of kind of tracking through your body. You can do, there are lots of different types, but this one is the calm body scan. So you're tensing and relaxing your chest, your arms, your leg, and then your mouth. Another one is just to focus on your shoulders, your jaw, and your brow, and just to relax those, imagining as you go that they're releasing. So like I said, lots and lots of practices, and it's about finding what fits with you and practicing them, so putting them into practice. And here are just a few to try in the moment. So this is if you're in a moment of high intensity, these might be useful. The first one is just simply labeling the stressful emotions, so noticing and then naming the emotions. That should be a plus instead of equals. As they pass, just helps to reduce the negative charge from those. The second practice is just having some mantra that just helps you to know that this moment is not going to last forever. I really like "there is not a lion" because it's very tangible that our brain might be reacting as if there is a lion in terms of flipping its lid, but there is not actually a lion. And then the third one, just focusing your attention on one thing. So like I said, make it super simple, just focus on your breath, but it could be anything that you focus on, and just allowing yourself just a moment to calm back down. Okay, I feel like this is the quickest whistle stop tour of mindfulness that I've ever done, but hopefully it's making sense. Lovely quote to finish this section, which is that almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And just a quick word on starting a new habit. There's this really great concept called habit stacking you may have heard of, which is where you take something that you're already doing. So hopefully everyone's brushing their teeth, and then you stack a new habit onto that. So you might brush your teeth and then take 3 deep breaths. If you're someone who drives to work or stops at red lights, you use every time you see a red light to take a deep breath in and out. So finding something that is happening in your life every day and attaching a new habit to it is a really good way of getting new habits to stick. And 60 seconds is all it takes. So think of a 60-second reset. Do that several times throughout your day just to bring your stress back down, help you to have manageable ways of relaxing. And the really important thing about practicing some mindfulness techniques is that you have to do it when you're calm. You can't expect them to work in the moment when you're needing them and getting activated if you haven't practiced them when you're calm. Okay. I'm going to try and talk about my 10 years of work with mindfulness for kids in 10 minutes and just leave a couple of moments for questions. So very quickly, I'm not going to say more than what's on the slide pretty much, but it's not about how much kids know before they go to school, which predicts how well they're going to do. It's can they sit on the mat and listen? Obviously schools are changing a bit and there's maybe not quite as much expectation, but at some stage in their school career, they're going to be asked to pay attention, and we don't teach kids how to do that. So mindfulness with kids is a really great way to teach kids how to be in charge of their mind. So the how-to with this one is starting with your own practice. So it's a little bit like being a swimming instructor. You can't teach a little kid to swim unless you know how to swim. You don't have to be an expert at it, but you do have to have some basic competency with practicing mindful living. So start with yourself, start with some of the things that I've suggested, and then move into using small and sticky concepts. So small and sticky things work best for kids, and that's what I'm about to talk about. And then practice, review, consult, and you might do that by yourself, you might do that with others. You might ask me for some help with that. I'd be really happy to help, but just always be kind of looking at how it's going. So the review part of that being really important. So the reason you start with your own practice, like I said, is you really hard to teach something that you don't practice. And also because you are the intervention for kids. So if you want kids to be able to calm themselves, you have to be able to be calm yourself. So your own nervous system is the intervention. And that's why we start with us. I guess also, just sorry, going back to that, is that little kids can't control their own emotions. They need an adult to do it. So we're really practicing emotional regulation with them, which is again a whole nother talk, but that's why we start with us. So now I'm just going to talk through some of the things that I do when I'm teaching mindfulness to kids in kindergarten. So with 3 and 4-year-olds, separated into 4 areas. There are a couple more which I won't go into tonight, but I'll mention them. But I always start with how our brains work. And when I'm teaching this with kids, I absolutely use the hand model of the brain. Kids get it. And I teach kids about the long words, so prefrontal cortex and amygdala. And I have heard stories of 3 and 4-year-olds going home and telling their parents, and their parents being gobsmacked because their 3 and 4-year-olds now know these brain science words that sometimes parents don't even know what they are. So I think it's really important for kids to know how their brains work. If I'm working with kids who are maybe closer to 5, I'm teaching them that their brain doesn't have to fully flip its lid. I'm giving them the idea that they might notice when their brain's doing a little bit of this, and that those are good times to calm themselves down. Again, talking about emotion regulation really, and giving kids opportunities to notice what it feels like when their brain starts to flip its lid, and inviting them to use that as an opportunity to calm down. I have a really visual way that I show kids also how their brain works, which I'm going to try and show you on the screen. So I have this enormous jar, hopefully you can see it. It's filled with buttons and sometimes beads at the bottom. I've got a wooden spoon, and there I talk with kids about the outside part of the jar being like their skull. Keeps the brain safe, it's nice and hard. Obviously you can't see inside your brain. And then I don't know how easy it is to see this, but I've got blur on, which may not have been good, but there are some buttons and beads at the bottom. And I talk about when we're calm, prefrontal cortex is in charge. This is what it looks like in the brain. But when our amygdala gets in charge, gets all sped up, goes really fast. And then we do deep belly breathing to calm it down. And we always do 3 deep belly breaths, and then it starts to come down. So it's a really nice visual for kids to kind of get this concept of swirly thinking, swirly thoughts, swirly feelings. Another way to do it is with a glitter bottle that you can make, or a snow globe. Excuse me, apparently there are also apps that you can get a phone and you can shake and they have glitter, which you then breathe to calm down. So the breathing to calm down bit is important because it's teaching them that when I feel like this, then I do this, and this helps me to feel calm. So that's how the brain works. So that's what I teach kids about the hand model of the brain and the jar. The core practice comes from a program called the Mind Up program. So I'm going to show you a book. This is the Mind Up curriculum. Oh, again, blurry. I don't know if I can. I was going to see if I can take my blur off to show you. Okay, so the Mind Up curriculum, it's for different ages. This is the curriculum that I base my work on. I've kind of adapted it, but this is from the Horn Foundation, and that's Goldie Hawn, who is an actress you might have heard of. That's some work that she's done with some others to bring a social emotional learning component to schools. So the core practice is deep belly breathing in the Mind Up curriculum. So everything revolves around deep belly breathing. So if you don't do anything else with your kids, teach them to put their hands on their bellies, take slow breaths in and slow breaths out. I say big breath in, slow breath out, to give them that experience of accessing calm through deep belly breathing when they are calm, so that when they get upset, as they get older, they may be able to access it themselves. So you're laying down a new neural pathway for them as well. You can make breathing fun in lots of ways. I use a windmill. I get kids to blow at the button. So big deep belly breath makes it spin around. I use a Hoberman sphere, which is one of these. Pull it apart, take a big breath in, push it together, slow breath out. You can also, there are lots of other breathing tools. a 5-finger breathing or starfish breathing, where you draw up and down your fingers as you breathe in and out. Number 8 breathing, so top circle is big breath in, bottom circle is slow breath out. Buddy breathing, where you put a soft toy on their belly when they're lying on their back and they watch the toy going up and down. There are lots and lots of ways to practice deep breathing with kids, slowing it down, making it fun. I'm pretty sure Sesame Street even do deep belly breathing now. So there's probably things online that you can find as well. The third one, mindful and unmindful. So I use a thumbs up, thumbs down for this. So being mindful, when I use it with kids, I don't use the long definition, I use it at the start. I say 2 things. It's paying attention, which means sitting up straight and looking and listening and noticing. And it also means being kind. So we've got a smile on our face. So paying attention, being kind, teasing out what those 2 things are. That's what I use for being mindful. Thumbs up, thumbs down, unmindful. Kids love to walk around telling their friends they're being unmindful. We have a negative bias in our brain, so unmindful is a hugely sticky concept. But it also gives some really lovely language about things that kids do and don't like. It takes away from good and bad. It means, will we be paying attention and being kind, or will we not paying attention and being kind? So it's actually, for me, it's a nice language to use. And then mindful sensing. So using the 5 senses, there are lots of great ways to do this very quickly. I do a mindful tasting with cranberries with kids that I work with. My record's 5 minutes to get a 3-year-old to mindfully taste a cranberry, which I think is pretty good. We do mindful smelling with little mindful smelling jars, mindful looking, using our mindful looking binoculars, and also playing an adapted Kim's game. Mindful listening, I use my basket and I hide things in it to make noises with so that we can hear what they are. Mindful moving, we play a game where we put our step into a pretend bubble and move around, trying not to knock each other. So again, lots of great ways to have fun with mindful sensing. The senses are a great way to do mindfulness practices with kids because kids are so sensory. So just coming up with creative ways of doing that. And then the 2 other things that I do that I haven't written down around mindful attitudes and mindful actions. So they're kind of the next step. Okay. So then it's more practicing. So practicing for the kids because you're trying to make a permanent pathway in their brain too. Preferably a daily practice, preferably like a ritual or routine. So when you sit down to have some kai and you say karakia, then you also deep belly breath. Or I really like one where you have wind chimes, and whenever you hear the wind chimes or you purposely touch them, everyone stops and does a deep belly breath. So anything that you can to include this as a part of your day. Here are some ideas that you can follow up on. Like I said, the 0 to 3 website's got heaps of really good stuff around mindfulness. For kids, actually all 3 of those websites do. Of the apps, Smiling Mind's got great stuff for little kids, which is guided, so it's a really good entryway. And the books are all quite old, but I still really love them, particularly The Whole Brain Child, around teaching adults how their brain works, which is how I then transferred it to kids. And these PDF of these are available, these slides, so don't worry if you haven't written them all down. Okay, I've got 4 minutes left. This is the last slide. This is the website that I talked about for my online business at the start. That's my email at the bottom. Really happy for people to email me if you have questions. There's also a contact form on the website if you didn't want to email. So Erin, I've got 4 minutes to take questions. I haven't checked the chat box, so I don't know if anything's come up. Or if anyone does have questions, please just pop your video on and ask me.
I can't see any questions that have popped up just yet.
Okay.
You were right with the whistle stop tour. We've been through it, and it's been great to hear more about mindfulness from what it is and what it isn't, right through to some tips and practices for ingraining it more, not only in our everyday lives, but in the lives of the tamariki that we care for. So I'm sure that there are some great takeaways. And like Judy said, we will be making The slides available to everyone post this. If you're joining us and you've registered, obviously, we will share that out so that you get a copy of all of these additional resources. I've been writing down some links myself around some of the different resources that are available. So is there anyone, you feel free to unmute yourself if you've got anything that you'd like to ask Judy while we've still got her.
Maybe everyone's asleep.
No, I can't see anything coming up. I'm just trying to, you can see me, can't you, Judy? Can you see me?
I can, yep. Well, it'll be really great.
I just wanted to show everyone this.
Oh, you've got your blur on. It's a little bit hard.
Well, you probably can't see, but this is a glitter jar that one of my boys made about 5 years ago, and that still has pride of place in his bedroom, and is still reached for during times of stress and pressure, and a really good example of that swirly thinking that you talked about, Judy, and something that is really great and visual for kids to be able to pick up and kind of translate in terms of how they're thinking and how to take control of their mind again, like you mentioned. So yeah. Great tool. Kerry says, thank you, Judy. Lots of great ideas to help both educators and children. Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, sorry. No, you go, Erin.
You go.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of being accountable, it's always good to set an intention. So if anyone wants to write their intention in the chat box about one thing that they're going to try this coming week, then do that. Writing it down helps. We can just write it down on a notebook. You don't have to write it in the chat box, but just being clear that you might make a start on something is always really a good way to get started.
Shireen's talking about testing out the breathing techniques.
Awesome.
And for our Tiny Nation educators, we will start working a little bit more on some of these resources and making them more visible and available for you to easily adapt into your day-to-day programs. Oh, I love the box technique. I'm going to practice that, says Kerry.
Awesome. Good luck with that one. It's a good one to practice.
All righty. Thank you so much for your time and expertise, Judy. And we will close that off and stop the recording. Just before we do that, we'll just finish with kia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he ho hu. Te hei Māori ora. Kia ora everyone, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to join us tonight. I'm sure we will talk to you all again soon. Thanks, Judy.
Thanks, Anne. Cheers.